Hello, my name is Joe Donahue, and I'm starting our group off for a research study replication project. I just want to say that this project has allowed us to take a more in-depth look into the workings of a behavior study by recreating an already established study. Our group decided to use the study a case study investigating a behavioral intervention to reduce caffeine consumption from the Women's Health Care Journal. In the original case study, the researchers investigated a behavioral intervention to reduce caffeine consumption in a 50-year-old female with a 35-year history of consuming more than 350 milligrams of caffeine per day. The study took place over 10 weeks, and during this time, the subject's caffeine intake was decreased over 3 different stages. While there did have to be some slight modifications due to time constraints, each member of our group recorded their daily caffeine intake over 3 weeks, with each week representing an individual stage. The graduated intervention was implemented as stage 1, which is week 1. Caffeine was to be greater than or equal to 160 milligrams a day. Stage 2, the caffeine needed to be equal to or less than 80 milligrams a day. And then in stage 3, it was equal or less than 35 milligrams per day. And it did appear that with most of our group members, headaches and fatigue were most common during the second phase and then seemed to dissipate during the third and final stage.
Hi, I'm Felicia Jackson, and I'm going to be going through our introduction and literature review for our report. Research has found that caffeine is one of the most highly consumed drugs worldwide, with recent estimates suggesting that each adult consumes approximately 280 milligrams a day. Caffeine has become such a large part of our society and our daily diet. For some individuals, they consume large amounts of caffeine daily and don't even realize the amount of caffeine that they are consuming. Caffeinated beverages often differ across demographic groups. Knight et al. States that more likely young females, non-Caucasian individuals with lower education levels are more likely to consume caffeine in forms of tea, whereas older Caucasians from higher income backgrounds are more likely to consume their caffeine through coffee. When looking at young adults, caffeinated energy drinks are consumed most commonly among students in college. It has also been discussed that among smokers and individuals that consume higher amounts of alcohol consume higher amounts of caffeine. There is also research that debates caffeine is a risk to one's health. Research supports that caffeine can benefit and harm one's health. It has also been discussed that with moderation, that caffeine could help enhance attention and performance. However, along with caffeine having some benefits for individuals, there are some side effects that may occur, which includes tiredness, headaches that come from the lack of caffeine. Some researchers have found that caffeine has also been known to increase one's blood pressure. Individuals that suffer from heart disease or high blood pressure may eliminate caffeine out of their diets completely due to the risk of their blood pressure being raised or the caffeine causing their heart to race. Caffeine is classified as one of the most addicting drugs that individuals consume. Caffeine is considered an addictive substance. Individuals that are used to consuming large amounts of caffeine usually have withdrawal effects such as tiredness, fatigue, or headaches when the amount of caffeine that they are used to consuming isn't being consumed anymore. Smith discussed that withdrawal from caffeine can last anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks, depending on the amount of caffeine that your body is used to consumed and the amount that was stopped. Some research suggests that when stopping caffeine uses, you need to stop consuming the caffeine in moderation and reducing your consumption daily. The current study aims to use behavioral intervention to reduce the amount of caffeinated beverages that is consumed each day. With each behavior modification change, there are steps that need to be followed, and the behavior needs to be gradually reduced. Caffeine levels were reduced by consumption of caffeine at low rates or no caffeine at all. Throughout the process of this study, the monitoring of possible side effects or withdrawal symptoms would include headaches and tiredness.
Hi, my name is Dana, and I'll be discussing a portion of our methods section for this replication study, particularly the participants. So the participants in the replication of this study included 5 members that reported moderate to high consumptions of caffeine. Of the 5 participants, 3 were female and 2 were male. Participants ranged from 25 to 32 years of age. All 5 participants in the study were graduate level students. Each participant reported prior to the study that their consumption of caffeine may be contributing to health and sleep problems. Participants felt that their use of caffeine correlated with attempts to counterbalance daytime tiredness. Prior to the intervention phase of the study, participants perceived losses with the elimination of caffeine from their daily diets. These included decreases in energy level, decreases in productivity, and increased levels of daytime tiredness. Perceived benefits from the elimination of excess caffeine consumption included overall improvements across participants' moods, sleeping habits, focus, and health. Each of the 5 participants conveyed strong commitment levels to the intervention phases, as well as providing and recording the necessary data that would be monitoring their health, tiredness, sleeping patterns, focus, and overall performance level. Accurate data collection from the participants would provide essential evidence for future decision-making and behaviors relating to the consumption of caffeine.
Hello, my name is Roger Jackson. I'm going to be discussing the instruments in the study design and intervention. The 5 participants conducted a 3-stage diary. This diary consisted of tracking what the amount of caffeine consumed was, the date it was consumed, the time, the location, and the type of drink that was consumed. The diary was used to make the tables and graphs. The caffeine amount in each drink was judged by the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand 2011. The drinks that were covered were instant coffee, black tea, diet cola, green tea, cappuccino, cereal beverage, caramel tea, and peppermint tea. There was no sugars added to any of the drinks, and the instant coffee and cappuccino was made with milk. A daily record will be completed by each individual to record the level of tiredness and headaches using a 10-point performance scale, 1 being poor and 10 being the highest performance. The scale was designed to measure one's concentration ability, overall alertness, memory retention, stress levels, and general mood. The study was a single subject design using changing criteria designs. For this subject, there was a stage 1 baseline, stage 2 intervention 1, and stage 3 intervention 2. The subjects' diaries were used in creating the table and graphs. A gradual intervention series was implemented. In stage 1, or baseline, the participants must consume greater or equal to 160 milligrams of caffeine per day. In stage 2, the participants must consume 80 milligrams of caffeine or less. The final stage, stage 3, the participants were allowed to consume less than 35 milligrams of caffeine per day. The diary lasted 19 days. Of these 19 days, they were divided up by 7 days that covered baseline, 7 days for intervention 1, in 5 days for intervention 2.
Okay, now I'm going to go through and kind of discuss the results from the end of our replication of the study. The average baseline caffeine consumption per person was roughly around 160 milligrams per day. And then much like the original research study, each group member consumed their caffeine through coffee, but tea and cola drinks were also consumed. For the most part, the caffeinated beverages were primarily consumed alone, but some were also consumed in a variety of different situations, either studying, working, meals, and during morning routine. While the original study ran for a 9-week intervention period with a single week of baseline, due to a shorter period of time, our group was forced to adjust that time period from 10 weeks to 3. In our stage 1, which was week 1, each of our group members ingested a minimum of 160 milligrams of caffeine per day, either through cup. And this was the week that we used as our baseline for the rest of the study replication. In stage 2, week 2, we reduced our caffeine consumption from a minimum of 160 milligrams of caffeine to a maximum of 80 milligrams. And then in stage 3, week 3, we further reduced our caffeine intake from a maximum of 80 milligrams to a maximum of 35. During each phase of our study replication, each group member was responsible for logging a diary of how much caffeine they were consuming on a daily basis, where and when they consumed the beverage, and a rating scale for their energy level and the intensity of the headaches, kind of as Roger discussed before. It was through these journal entries that we were able to keep track of everything required by the original study. And then we took that information and put them in a graph to track the decreasing amount of our caffeine consumption. While the original study subject did have an increase in fatigue and headaches when her caffeine was decreased, most of our groups didn't suffer from the same intensity of side effects, as it seems. And I think this could be mainly due to the fact that for the shortened period of this project was 3 weeks versus the original study being 10 weeks. But that being said, most of our group members did show a change in their tidiness and the quantity of headache. And as an example kind of our project, here's my graph. You can see here on the left during phase 1, the baseline. It's pretty straightforward with 1 day kind of a spike, kind of rough day at work, needed a little extra coffee. But it was a minimum of 160 milligrams per day with caffeine consumption. And that's kind of on par with probably how my normal caffeine consumption is on a daily basis. And then here in phase 2, intervention 1, it was dropped to a maximum of 80 milligrams. I know personally it was kind of during this phase 2, I did feel a little bit of fatigue, definitely when it got into kind of about midday and later in the day. Headaches, I had a few days where I suffered for minor headaches, but nothing with too much intensity. And then when we got into phase 3, the intervention 2, where we had the max of 35 milligrams, I actually felt like my energy level went up, and then amount of headaches went down. And then during this week that I mainly did like black tea or green tea.
Okay. So this is my graph. Before I started this study, I consumed the same amount of coffee every morning. I consume 2 8-ounce cups of coffee, plain black coffee each morning, each cup having 95 milligrams of caffeine for a total of 180 milligrams of caffeine that was consumed each day. It didn't change any. It stayed the same every single day. Then when I got to phase 2, as you can see, I lowered my caffeine consumption to 15 milligrams each day, which consisted of consuming a plain glass, which was 2 8-ounce cups of green tea, totaling 16 ounces. And then for my last phase, I consumed 25 milligrams of plain green tea, which is 1 8-ounce cup of green tea. Through each of the phases, I didn't have any headaches during the phase. I thought I was going to because I went from consuming such a large amount of 180 milligrams of caffeine down to 50 milligrams of caffeine, which is an extreme amount. Throughout each phase, I did experience some tiredness in the middle of the day, and I would feel like the urge like I needed caffeine, but I didn't consume any, and after about 30 minutes of the urge and tiredness from the lack of caffeine, it would go away, and I was fine.
Hello, this is my graph. As you can tell, my caffeine intake increases as the week goes on. For the last 2 days of baseline, I happen to be up later, which could show why I consumed more caffeine. But I started off at 200, and then by the final day of baseline, I was at 600 milligrams of caffeine. Then the first 2 days of phase 2, I did have severe headaches, but this is probably due to the huge decrease. And phase 2 consisted of mainly drinking black tea, 50 milligrams, 1 cup a day. And then towards the end of phase 2, I dropped down to green tea, 1 cup a day. Then, when phase 3 came, I stayed consistent with my 1 cup of green tea a day until the final 3 days, which on Friday, I was more tired than I was on the Thursday and the Saturday. During phase 3, I did not feel any headaches or tiredness. I was fine and was able to complete my tasks without the need of the caffeine.
I'm going to go ahead and talk about my graph now. So for me, I was pretty consistent with my caffeine consumption, as you can see here in baseline. So I started out with consuming 180 milligrams per day of caffeine, which was 16 ounces of plain black coffee. For me, my tiredness range was between scoring a 5 to a 7 on our performance scale, which again, remember, 10 was the highest, meaning we were in our best performance, and 1 being the poorest, meaning we're in our lowest performance. So my average score for tiredness was a 6.3. My average score for headaches was a 9.9 with a range from 9 to 10. In phase 2, or the first stage of our intervention, we dropped down to consuming 80 milligrams of caffeine per day. And so that's what I did here, and that was 8 ounces of plain black coffee for me. My tiredness average was a 6.4, so it really didn't change that much for me for baseline. And that range was a 6 to 7 on our performance scale. And then my headache average was a 9.4, so it dropped a little bit. So I was experiencing a little bit of headaches in this phase, but nothing too drastic. and that range was an 8 to a 10 on our scale. In the third phase, or our second stage of our intervention, we dropped down to 35 milligrams of caffeine being consumed a day. And for me, I did 3.5 ounces of black coffee. Here, my tiredness average dropped all the way to a 5.0. So I was either definitely feeling it this week more than the other ones, or it was a really rough week at work, or a contribution of the two. My range for that on our performance scale was anywhere from a 5 to a 7. My headache average was a 9.7, so I actually wasn't experiencing the same amount of headaches as I was in stage 1 or phase 2 of our intervention. And the range for that was a 9 to 7 on our performance scale.
Hello, my name is Miranda Scott, and as you can see throughout my graph, I wasn't consistent as everybody else were. That was probably due to the fact that I drunk different things on each day. As you can see, my on the first phase, it was kind of rocky. Due to the fact that on that Monday, I had a big report in another class, so I really drunk a glass of green tea, and also I drunk some coffee. On this, as the week went on, I kind of went down in the amount that I drank, but then I spiked again on that on the October the 15th, as you can see. During the second phase, we wasn't supposed to consume no more than 80 milligrams of caffeine. As a result, I start having headaches and some fatigue, some tiredness. And that was probably due to the big spike in where I lowered the amount of caffeine that I consumed. But then again, it was consistent over a few days, and then on October the 21st, I kind of went up to 80. I went up to the 80 milligrams, and then which I drank 2 cups of green tea. Then, as you can see, during phase 3, we wasn't supposed to drink no more than 35 milligrams. So as a result, I did the minimum. And then on those last 3 days, I didn't drink nothing but peppermint tea and water. So I didn't drink any caffeine at all. That's why it went down to 0. Now, when it went down to 0 on October the 26th, I really was tired. I guess because I just went cold turkey and didn't drink any caffeine at all. But as the days went out, I was still a little tired, but it wasn't as the headaches and the fatigue didn't hit me as bad as October the 26th. I guess I'm going to jump right into the discussion part. As you see, as it was mentioned earlier, our topic was mainly on caffeine consumption, and there is a widespread of caffeine consumption in America today. Although caffeine is known to be strengthened, all is known to strengthen our alertness and help stimulate our attention functioning, it can also have its negative side effects also, and those side effects can be detrimental to our health. As a result, caffeine is something you need to kind of drink in moderation. As a result, my whole group came to a consumption that the article that we chose was a good article to choose, because we all wanted to lower the intake of caffeine that we consume daily. The primary purpose of the original study was to lower the intake of caffeinated drinks through the usage of a behavior moderation treatment. In the study, there was a lipid test portion. However, since this did not affect our data, we did not feel the need to, and also we didn't have the equipment to run the test, we did not feel a need to replicate this in our study. Our result, as was mentioned earlier, our results revealed that the behavior intervention was able to lower all the participants' caffeine consumption down to 35 milligrams of caffeine or less. Considering that we all started out drinking a lot of caffeine, which 160 milligrams or higher, reducing our caffeine intake to 35 milligrams was a huge improvement. Although as mentioned earlier, although the original study was 10 weeks, we didn't have enough time to replicate that, so we just did 3 weeks. However, within those 3 weeks, we were able to gain enough data. Likewise, we were able to show a functional relationship between the behavior intervention and our decrease in caffeine consumption. Based off the information that was written in everybody's journal, all the members of the groups drank their caffeine in different environments, and those different environments may have played a role in the reason why they drank those type of caffeines. These results also stand in alignment with the original study, because there were several different environmental factors that motivated each participant in the original study, to indulge in the type of caffeine that they drank. The results also revealed that the rates of tiredness and headaches differed tremendously. However, this was probably due to the fact that everyone drank different levels of caffeine per day. Although the behavior moderation treatment helped us lower our intake of caffeine successfully, there were many limitations and downsides in this study. For instance, the study mentioned that they had an ABA design. However, this was not the type of design that should have been utilized, considering that the amount of caffeine intake was decreased in a stepwise and a gradual fashion. The type of treatment design that should have been used should have been a changing criterion design. Due to the fact that this study did not possess any tactics that ensured the intervention was applied as it needed to be, no one really knows whether there were unidentified features that accidentally placed an increase or a decrease in the original behavior intervention. Therefore, the original study lacked treatment fidelity. This drawback caused us to improperly conduct treatment fidelity as well. For instance, it was difficult for each one of us to know the exact amount of caffeine in each drink. I know a study that I read said a study conducted by Chen and his colleagues said that the longer the green tea and the coffee brew, the higher amount of caffeine is in each coffee. Therefore, there is a high possibility that everyone did not consume the same amount of caffeine in each drink. Also, we probably didn't abide by the standards of the study neither, because the standards were in Australian standards and we are in American standards, which although they didn't differ that much, they differed quite a bit. Another limitation in the study that we had problems with was the IOA portion. As a result, our group was forced to create our own edition of IOA data. Due to the fact that each participant had to collect their own data, and it would have been impossible for everyone in the group to view each other's data, because that would have meant that we had to be there at a specific time, which was impossible considering that we all are in different states and have different time zones. A major factor that inhibited us was, like I just said, the time in the different states. Provided that we had this problem, we created this modified version. And with the modified version, we focused on the number of milligrams instead of the fact that each individual actually consumed the caffeine. Basically, our group just directed our attention on examining whether two other members, look at their data to make sure that the members drunk the accurate amount of caffeine. We did this by pairing off with at least 3 members of our group and analyzed each other's data, and we analyzed the primary data collector's data. So we all used the caffeine estimation table that was provided in the protocol assignment that we had. And to verify each group members were on track, we looked at that graph. Each IOA collaborator individually conducted their own calculations based off the amount of caffeine each primary collector said that they drank. Each IOA collector multiplied the number of cups that they seen on the table that the primary data collector said they had, and they multiplied it by the assumed milligrams per cup. Then the IOA collaborator compared their numbers to the primary data's collector. If the number of milligrams that the IOA partner had matched the same amount that the primary individual data had, then we would say that it's 100% agreement. In other words, the 2 observers came to a consensus and said that the primary data collector actually met the criteria for each phase. We also expected that the individual consumed the caffeine based off the number of milligrams that they consumed. We are well informed that this is not really IOA data, and we know that it's very similar to treatment integrity. However, that was the only way we could really collect some type of IOA data based off the fact that we were not able to see one another. Things that should be done in the future. We feel like due to the imperfections in the original study, there needs to be a lot done to help straighten out this study. For instance, the study should specify the brand of caffeine or the brand of green tea and coffee that they want each participant to consume, instead of being so broad and say, hey, you can drink this type of caffeine or you could just drink this brand of coffee. That would also help with internal and external validity. Also, there should include a checklist for treatment fidelity, so each group member can check off the certain steps of consuming this type of caffeine. This will help ensure that the participant is accurately replicating the original study. In addition, there should be some strategies implemented in the study to ensure that the data is reliable and accurate. Each participant in the study can document the caffeine intake by videotaping themselves every time they consume a caffeinated drink. Also, to confirm that that they are actually conducting IO data, each individual can independently examine the same video at different times. Lastly, there should be a procedure examination system where 2 or more participants are required to watch the video precisely at the same time. Once all these limitations are addressed, anyone will be able to replicate the study with ease, and this would be a better study that would be able to be replicated, and that will help everyone. That basically concludes our presentation, and I thank you all for watching our video.